cannot just be a flag. The symbol also has to be one of its citizens exercising his right to burn that flag in protest. Now show me that. Defend that. Celebrate that in your classrooms. Then you can stand up and sing about the land of the free. I've known Bob Rumson for years, and I've been operating under the assumption that
Welcome,
the reason
everybody.
Bob devotes so much time and energy to shouting at the rain was that he simply didn't get it.
We got a good show this
Well, I was
morning.
wrong. Bob's
Starting.
problem isn't that he doesn't get it.
Why don't we listen to
Bob's
this intro
problem is
while
that
everybody's
he
getting
can't
going?
sell it. We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them. And whatever your particular problem is, I promise you, Bob
Donald
Rumson
Trump
is not the least bit interested in solving it. He is interested in two things, and two things only: making you afraid of it and telling you who's to blame for it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you win elections.
There you go. Welcome, everybody. As we're just getting the show started, kicking off the new times. I'm going to start every day. Well, I'm going to do my best to be here most days, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and again at 9 p.m. Eastern time for at least an hour each day. So if you're interested in being part of the show and tuning in to the hot takes or whatever discussion we're talking about on that particular day, please remember those times. Like I said, I'll do my best to do every day during the week, 1 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Eastern, weekdays. On the weekends, it'll be a little bit more random, and I will post this underneath my profile when the live times will be. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of really interesting topics. I'm going to put up a different view. Thanks everybody on IG for joining, and from YT as well. It's good to see the Instagram audience growing. And of course, the YouTube, the TikTok audience is always awesome. Those of you on IG, you can't see the background, so you can't get full context. So I would suggest YT is probably the best place to watch, or no, TikTok is the best place to watch because you can join the live, request up, and have real conversations. And you get to see more of the comments there as well. But it's awesome to see people here on IG as well. And the audience is always growing. So we're going to be talking about Greenland and Venezuela today. Last night, we had a lot of Venezuelans that joined the call, which was really cool to see. It's we got a lot of perspective on how people from Venezuela were reacting to the news of, obviously, the removal of Maduro. So that was good to see, and hopefully we'll have more of those people in. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things today. I'm going to pull up the new background, Ukraine bound. I'm going to let you come up now, even though I'm not quite ready for guests. Actually, okay, good. You went away. I'm not quite ready for guests, but excuse me, I need to also put up the Greenland map, because the hot topic today, if you haven't heard, is what's happening. Stephen Miller, the little shit weasel box that he is, trying to stir up trouble as normal. The Heritage Foundation agent, the Pro-Is agent, in my opinion, I'll say that in my opinion for the moderators and for the AI moderators, in my view, the little shitbag that Stephen Miller is obviously trying to stir up trouble again because his wife made a tweet this weekend about the United States, of course, now next wanting Greenland. So all the Venezuelans that are listening, if you think that we did this to help you and help your democracy, you're wishful thinking, and I'm glad you have hope, and it's great that you feel that you got rid of a unelected president and a dictator, and that we should have democracy in Venezuela. But I don't see that happening yet. Do you? Are we installing? Is Trump demanding that the Democratic elected president of Venezuela is going to be installed into Venezuela? Are we hearing that? No, we're not hearing that, because he doesn't care about democracy in Venezuela. And again, I hope things work out well for Venezuela, but the United States has a terrible history on trying to nation build, right? And are we really taking over Venezuela? Absolutely not. So do not be afraid. You have zero idea what is happening. Yeah, I have zero idea what's happening. Good try. Is that the best you can do? I have a lot of research. I've spoken to a lot of people. So I think I have more than a little bit of an idea. And no one who doesn't know what they're doing, Trump because it's really Rubio pulling the strings. Trump is just being informed what's happening. He's not being actually doing much of anything. It's certainly not a Trump plan because that word, a plan, and Trump is foreign to him. There are no plans when it comes to Trump other than creating chaos. One moment. All right, so I need to get up a Wizard of Ozempic. You're going to come up just for a moment. I'm not taking too many guests just yet because I need to go through the monologue and talk about Venezuela and talk about Greenland as well. But as I'm getting set up for this live, I need, let's see what you have to say.
I want you to explain to the crowd why you think Donald Trump doesn't have any plan, is incapable of making a plan when he's more than once shown his geopolitical abilities are very thought out.
So are we supposed to be, so we're supposed to be a transparent country, right? So if there was a plan, why aren't we being told the plan?
Nobody said that. Don't gaslight. Nobody said we're supposed to be transparent.
I'm not gaslighting. Why hasn't he told us the plan? If he's so assured that he's lied to us up front, right? This is about drugs.
Why would he tell you the United States plan?
Because we're a fucking democracy and the people are in charge.
Do you understand? So publicly state what his plan is so other countries know? Is that what you're recommending?
Yeah, that's how it works. People tell you who they are.
Are you fucking retarded, dude?
No,
Honest question. Are you retarded?
All right. No, you apparently are a dipshit and don't understand how democracy is supposed to work.
He's going to publicly state it so China knows what we're doing, right?
But taking our actions. China knows what we're doing. You think China doesn't know what he's doing?
Just wrap it up, man. You look ridiculous.
Dude.
Have a good day.
You too. Later, man. All right. Some people clearly don't support. They just want to support Trump for any particular reason. They actually don't. They think Trump has a plan. They think Trump has a plan. I'll tell you what the plan is about Venezuela, and then we'll go to about Greenland. Where do we want to start first? Let me know what most people are interested in here. Are we more interested in what's happening with Stephen Miller's quote on Greenland, or more interested in basically the 6 or 7 things that are playing out in Venezuela? I always assume that Trump has no plan. Now listen, Brian, it's a responsibility. The executive branch doesn't have the authority under the Constitution to do this, right? This is Congress is the one who is responsible for trade deals. Congress is the one responsible for spending money. Congress is the one that's responsible for declaring war. You're supposed to keep Congress not just updated, you're supposed to request permission. But of course, we know Trump's not the first person that hasn't done that, but it doesn't make it right. It's against the Constitution to remove a head of state. It's against our laws of the Constitution. So whether it's a declaration of war or not, he has no right, even though I'm not suggesting it's not ultimately possibly a good thing that you remove a dictator. But give me a fucking break if you guys think, if anyone actually thinks that Trump is doing this to install democracy into Venezuela. Because if that was a goal to make life better for Venezuelans, he would absolutely be demanding that the Venezuelan government that's currently still in place installs a Democratic elected president that was not allowed to resume power because Maduro stayed in power. So wake the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. People tell you who they are, and it's the responsibility of the United States president to tell its people what's happening. You don't, just like Bush did in lying to us about Iran and Iraq, and going to war under false pretenses. He again is claiming this was about D-Rugs, but of course, now that it's happened, it has nothing to do about D-Rugs, or very, very little. And it has everything to do about, no, not even oil. Oil is just one factor in this, but obviously oil, removing China and Russia's influence and so forth. And mostly a lot to do with Cuba, which we'll get to in a minute. I didn't see any comments. I'm going to ask in the comments. Thanks everybody for joining. Are you more interested in what's happening in Venezuela here, or more interested in what's happening in Greenland, or the comments that Stephen Miller made about Greenland right here? So I'm going to wait for the comments. Are we most interested in these comments? I don't know if a lot of people have seen this yet. These are the comments made by Stephen Miller. give Elon Musk ideas. We got a lot of magatards here today. And by the way, I'm an independent. So if you're going to be ridiculous about Cuba, you want to hear about Cuba, Greenland and NATO, just peachy. I don't know where we're going to start off on today, and wait for a few more things to come in, a few more comments and opinions. Where do we want to be? We want to be with Greenland, or do you want to talk about Venezuela? Michael, I'm not mean to my audience. Actually, I'm generally very respectful. Typically, I don't like to get into these debates, but I don't stand for people talking nonsense about Trump's morals and integrity and like the guy has a plan. He doesn't. He doesn't have a plan. If he does have a plan, he's supposed to inform the American population, not lie to what's happening. He doesn't have to say everything, but he does have a responsibility to be truthful, just like Bush wasn't. And I know many presidents haven't been, but you need to be able to articulate what your global foreign policy is. And it's not his responsibility to change. He shouldn't be changing the global world order since World War II. That's the problem I have when people come up and they just talk nonsense about trying to deflect and think that he actually has a plan. Because I'll tell you what the plan is. Kiss the sky. I wish you could post a map here for you. We'll explain a lot. I'm going to bring in a couple people, Mr. Global and Dirk Fun. Dirk, you're just going to have to wait a few minutes because I'm just going to wait to talk about this. What's up, Mr. Global? Good morning. Afternoon.
Hey TK,
What's
how you
up,
doing?
man? I'm doing
I must have missed something. It seems a little tense in here.
Yeah, it's a little tenser than it normally is. Yeah, because I had one magatard come up and already try and defend Trump that he's doing something to help the Venezuelan people, or basically that he wasn't telling his plan. I've asked, like, you need to tell the American people what your intentions here are and not just lie about it, right? And they didn't like that.
Yeah, I think that the perspective I'm realizing is more or less maybe a China move. It may be related more to our issues with China and Taiwan because China just had a huge exercise surrounding Taiwan and some sort of military show. So I think that could be possibly what's going on here.
Well, I'm going to go through the 6 reasons that I have for it, but I think I'm going to start on Greenland. So we have a nice audience here. Last night we had a great audience as well. Did you see this quote that from Stephen Miller? We live in a real world that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the ironclad laws of the world since the beginning of time.
I did see that one.
So I'm going to respond to this because I'm not going to spend too much time. But there's obviously a connection to what's happening in Venezuela and Greenland. So if we want to, like Stephen Miller's causing chaos by talking about Greenland, he started with his wife first posting on Twitter, I think. I don't know if it's Twitter or Truth Social, about, Greenland's next, right? So Greenland is all about minerals and resources, all about minerals and resources, and obviously access to the Arctic as well. But this quote is what a little weasel POS. This is not the world we're supposed to be living in. This is not the world the United States, FDR, and Churchill set up after World War II. We're not supposed to be. We designed a world, the real world, the current real world, where it's governed by rules and it's governed by values and it's backed by strength and it's backed by force. And it's not governed by power. The new world order that we should be still adhering to, because if we're going to go back to a world, the so-called real world that Stephen Miller believes in, that is governed by strength, that is governed by just force and just by power, that is going to be a very ugly world for every single human being on this planet, because that just means all out imperialism conflicts between the strongest powers. We are a new world since the end of World War II that we could continue with if we had proper leadership in not only the United States, but with our allies, in a world based on rules, based on values, and backed by strength and backed by force. That's the world I want to live in. That's the world that the vast majority of all peaceful people around the world would like to live in. So when he says this quote, challenge it. Challenge the little weasel, the little Heritage Foundation scum that he is, and the pro-is scum that he is, and realize he doesn't give a shit about you or me or anyone else. These people in control and power, they are ideologues. They have very nefarious and sinister intentions, and they're just not decent human beings. These are psychopaths, and they are sociopaths, and they are narcissists. Oh, and you can just add on to the adjectives. This is what it is.
Stephen Miller's kind of the guy. There was it, yeah, Charlie Kirk's funeral. He was the one that got up and started talking, and I was just kind of like, who the hell is this guy? Like, the way he talks is just kind of bizarre to me. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, he's just a creepy little shit like so many other people. Like, obviously he didn't have any decent relationships in his life, and he's just a creep, and he's now just taking his revenge out because he's in a place of power, and whatever sinister intentions or warped views he has, these are not the views of all of us.
The collective punishment of the choice of a few is kind of where you have to draw the line, right? Like,
Yep.
We're going to get into some sort of issue. It always does. And everybody else is going to face the consequence because this is what they decided to do. So,
Yep. Coco says, you absolutely lean left. I have some left-leaning progressive values, no doubt about it, but I also have plenty of conservative values. You just think I lean left because you're probably so far right that anything just a little bit towards the old school Republican probably seems left to you. That's how these things work, Coco. I'm a staunch independent. I've never been associated with either party. I am never tribal. I only care about particular issues, and most important, I care about the issue of eliminating corruption from the political system. I don't care what your personal issue is. I care about values. I care about integrity, and that's what I care about, and making sure that corruption is eliminated from government. So you can say left or right, but then you're just getting yourself pigeonholed into a whole left versus right tribal mentality, because you think that's how the only way to think about things is left versus right. And it's not. There's something much more broad you can think of. All right, so let's maybe jump. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention, somebody made a decent comment or something that I thought maybe would be interesting for you to maybe touch on a bit. But does seem to be two camps, imperialists and globalists. So I guess it's a philosophical issue here. And that's something that, I mean, from my perspective, I can assimilate with that. I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
As imperialism, as obviously trying to conquer as much of the world as possible, versus the globalists, which I would say is the view of the rich and powerful sort of organizing together to control all of us. Is that sort of like in a snapshot?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't believe in the globalist theory. I believe there is some semblance of that's going on between rich and powerful people that do want to control not just a population in the United States and so forth. So I do believe there are forces that are just trying to have as much control and enrichment as possible. But like to believe there's actually a singular sort of cobalt of globalists that are trying to do these things, no, that I don't believe. However, in the terms of imperialist, yes, there's always going to be thousands of people that have dreams of grandeur that are trying to assume much power in whatever region, whatever country they can, right? So if you're head of a mafia boss, you're trying to assume as much control over your region where you operate and expand that region. So that would be an imperialist in a mafia scale, right? If you're a drug warlord, and if of course you're a leader of a state and you want to build empires, which is what basically Stephen Miller you're sort of alluding to. We are not an imperialistic nation. We haven't been for a while. In the past, we have been, but the United States doesn't go in and take territories from other countries. We haven't done that since the 19th century. So we don't do that. So we're not an imperialistic nation. However, Trump and Stephen Miller are moving us in direction. If we take over Greenland, if we actually go ahead and try and do something with Greenland and actually try and take over Venezuela as controlling it, then again, we're definitely operating as an imperialistic nation. And then we're giving green light to Russia and China that, hey, this is okay. We're not supposed to be a world that goes to war anymore. We're supposed to be a world that tries to solve our issues diplomatically. And if we go imperialistic, then the rest of the world will as well. And there's no stopping it. That's my view.
Understood.
All right. We got a few people waiting to join, both on Instagram and on TikTok. But you're going to hang on just a moment because I just want to run through. I want to switch gears to Venezuela and talk about the reasons about, again, this is evolving. You may have different opinions on this, but let's talk about what's really or the likely agenda behind what's happening in Venezuela. First off, we've been sold a lie, right? That this is about D-rugs because Venezuela has very little influence in the amount of D-rugs that make their way to the United States. There is some transportation of D-rugs through Colombia, from Colombia through Venezuela to the United States. That is true. But the Venezuela is not a producer of many D-rugs that make itself to the United States. So that was a lie. This has very little to do with drugs, if anything. It was just a pretense. And we've heard these pretenses before. So it's not about D-rugs. So then most people think, of course, it has to be about oil. And how much is it about oil? Do we want to just go in and take over the Venezuelan oil fields and give those oil fields access back to the U.S. major oil companies? And most of us thought that's probably it, right? Because everything the United States does geopolitically, a lot of it has to do with oil. But it doesn't make any sense. And I knew it didn't quite connect. And the reason is the oil companies themselves have said they have no desire at this point to invest money back in Venezuela and pull out more oil. And there's two reasons why. Number one, because when they were kicked out of Venezuela over the past decade and a half, they've been investing $500 billion. And the source for this is the other Mr. Global, who talked about this, that they invested $500 billion in Canada, in Canadian oil fields. And Canada has the same type of deep, heavy crude that Venezuela has, very similar types. And it can be refined in our refineries. And we know this is true because the refineries in both the Gulf of Mexico and up by the Great Lakes, the ones owned by the Koch brothers, many of them, are already operating at relative full capacity. So there is more than enough oil coming from Canada, and the investment has already been made in Canada, and they're not going to spend tens of billions of dollars to reestablish the Venezuelan oil fields when there's no need for it. Because if they were to do that, they would then be, number one, they would be spending money on their investments, so that would not look good on their balance sheets. Number two, if they end up bringing Venezuela from 900 barrels, 1,000 barrels a day, back up to 3 million or 3.5 million like they used to be up, they would flood the market with extra heavy crude that they could not refine, and that would make the value of that crude go way down. So then their profit margins would be much smaller. So they would literally be cannibalizing their investment in Canada by going into Venezuela. Now, the oil companies will probably tell Trump that they're going to do this. And you might hear the oil companies say they're going to invest in Venezuela, but they are not going to do so unless it's paid for by the U.S. government. And even then, they most likely won't do it because they don't need more oil. They can't do anything with it at this time. Now, the oil companies have supported regime change in Venezuela in the past, and maybe they will need that oil in 5 or 10 or 15 years, but there's no need for them to have it right now, and they're certainly not going to invest it. So that's why the oil theory only plays a very small part in this, because the oil companies have told us that they're not going to do this. So time will tell if that's true, but it just makes sense. We have all the dark crude refineries in the Gulf and up by the Great Lakes that are operating at full capacity. We can't do anything else. We would actually have to ship it off to either Cuba, who can refine it, or to China, who can refine it. So that makes no sense for us to do that. So then the next theory is, okay, what does this have to do about? Well, it could also do about a little bit more about oil. And it's potentially because BRICS is working, the payment system of BRICS, or the so-called payment system, is not a payment system yet. It's called the units. It's basically an alternative to the SWIFT payment system. BRICS is working on a payment system so that countries that are part of BRICS can trade oil in BRICS units and not dollars. And that wouldn't destroy the dollar, by the way, people. So that would not destroy the petrodollar. It would lessen the demand for the dollar, the liquidity of the dollar, but it wouldn't destroy the dollar. And there is a play here that says those 900,000 barrels of oil that are coming out of Venezuela, if BRICS gets their shit together and the unit becomes a thing, then they would trade that oil in BRICS units. So it's not an enormous amount of oil, but we want all oil traded in dollars. The more that's traded in dollars, it props up the dollar and it keeps the dollar stronger as the global reserve currency. So that does have a play that by taking over the Venezuela oil fields, it ensures that we have to be paid in dollars. So it prevents it being paid in units. Now you can also imagine if this BRICS units thing was a thing and Venezuela was selling their oil in units, you can't spend those units. You can't utilize those units in any other country than those countries that are BRICS associated, right? Because you don't have dollars. So you can't purchase things from the United States or from Mexico and so forth. You have to purchase them from BRICS. So what would happen is very similar to what's happening in Russia right now, is if there was value in this BRICS unit thing from BRICS, they would have to exchange that BRICS unit and purchase things from where? Who are the two largest countries in BRICS that actually produce a lot of shit? And that would be China and India. So then the market in Venezuela would then be starting to move more towards Chinese influence because cars in Venezuela could be possibly purchased. You know, we're going down a little bit of rabbit holes, but if you had currencies in units and not in these dollars, you would end up getting a lot more goods and supplies coming from China. And the United States definitely does not want that to happen. This is happening in Russia right now when Russia sells its oil to China. China purchases that oil and sends them money in Chinese currency. Then now Russia has a lot of Chinese currency. So where can they use that money? They can only use it in China. They can't convert it to dollars. You can't take billions of dollars and say of Chinese currency and turn it into dollars. Not when you're sanctioned. And even if you're not sanctioned, it's still not easy to do. So what happens is in Russia, they're being flooded by goods from China because there's a lot of money from the oil revenue because they can't sell their oil to any of the Western countries that would pay in dollars. So the Russians and the Russian government doesn't have as many dollars, but they have a whole lot of Chinese currency. And that means that's why 60% of all the auto sales happening in Russia are now Chinese cars. And it's cannibalizing the entire Russian car industry, which is also, by the way, it's just a piece of shit industry. It's just they don't even know how to make cars. So it's not surprising you'd rather have a Chinese car versus a Russian car. But this is what happens. So Chinese goods are flooding into Russia. So the same thing potentially could happen if Venezuela is selling their oil in units. They would have to be able to exchange that in Chinese currency and be able to purchase Chinese products. So I'm going to stop there just for a moment, read the comments, and get your first thoughts on it. Well, Mr. Global, did that make sense to you, or does it seem out there?
No, I think that's kind of where my mind is at. I think the whole Maduro, drug trafficking thing is the psyop. That's the distraction. There's something much deeper going on here, right? So it's this isn't checkers. This is chess, and that's just where I'm at on it. Obviously, I don't have all the answers because a lot of they're really good at keeping things hidden, so it's hard to really know, and they're not really good at telling the truth.
Yeah.
And but anyways,
if you parse through some of the words, you start to hear the truth. If you start to question, like during the press conference when Rubio and Trump, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So the dollars, the situation where BRICS and dollars has a lot of validity, but I still don't believe it's the most important reason we're doing this. And it has everything to do with Cuba. Have you heard this yet?
Frankly, I have not.
Okay, so this one I think you're going to like. This is, by the way, this is courtesy of UNFTR Media. The guy is brilliant. He's on YouTube. It stands for Unfucking the Republic. UNFTR Media. Everyone should subscribe to his channel. He's got a huge audience, and he's the one that has done most of the investigative journalism on this. And then combined with what Mr. Global, the oil and energy expert, has said, we're piecing these things together. So these views and these perspectives you're getting from me are evolving every day a little bit. They're growing, they're advancing. They're not conspiratorial. They are based in fact and based on evidence. And I'll prove some of that to you now, because now we're going to the most wild part of this story, and it has everything to do with Cuba. Okay, so first, what you need to know about Cuba. So we're talking about Venezuela. So why would we remove a head of state from Venezuela when I'm talking about Cuba? Well, first you have to understand that Cuba and Venezuela have the most strategic alliance, or anti-American alliance, in Latin America in terms of both political and economic. They have been trading partners, deep trading partners, for a very, very long time, since the 1960s. Cuba has had a lot of influence in Venezuela for 60 plus years. There's a lot of connection between Cuba and Venezuela that people don't know. So why would we want to remove Maduro? Okay, you have to understand the trading partnership here. Venezuela keeps Cuba afloat because it sends them oil. There's a trading deal between, it's actually called Cuba-Vena. Cuba-Vena is the name of it, or there's two ways to say it, Venezuela or Cuba. And it's just a trade partnership between the two. Venezuela sends oil to Cuba. Cuba can refine that oil. They have one refinery that can refine deep, heavy crude from Venezuela. And that has been the lifeline for Cuba ever since Cuba and the Soviet Union failed. They lost their subsidies, and they lost their oil access from Russia or from the old Soviet Union. So Cuba has been getting fuel or oil from Venezuela for a very long time. In return, Cuba sends tens of thousands of workers down to Venezuela. Cuba, most people don't know, used to, and I don't know if it still has today, but has a very strong healthcare system. Always has for decades now. It's been ranked one of the top healthcare systems in the world. I don't know what their ranking is in the last 3 years, but prior to that, to many people's surprise, Cuba's healthcare system is very strong. So they send doctors, nurses, other healthcare workers. They send technology specialists. They actually send security forces as well, and that's why 34 Cuban security forces died in the raid that American had against Maduro, because a lot of these are Cuban security forces as well. So they send tens of thousands of people to Cuba, and Venezuela sends oil to Cuba to keep the energy infrastructure going. So people say, okay, so what? What does that mean? This is where the plan comes in. This is where the 2-for-1 special comes in. By removing Maduro and trying to replace them with a friendly U.S.-backed government, or coercing the existing government that they're going to have to play ball, they're going to have to be play by our rules, is they want to restrict the oil flows from Venezuela to Cuba. They want to choke Cuba off in terms of energy. That's what do. And you might say, who wants to do that? Why would they do that? This is Marco Rubio. Little Marco Rubio. This is the grand plan. Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State, and this is his plan. And you might say, why? Why does Marco Rubio care? Because Marco Rubio is Cuban American. His parents emigrated from Cuba in 1956. 2 years later, Castro took over Cuba. They felt exiled from Cuba. His parents wanted to return to Cuba, and they couldn't because of Castro, and the communist regime took power. And that's why millions, or I don't know the exact figure, I think it's well over 1 million Cubans left Cuba and are now residing in Florida, just like Marco Rubio, except he wasn't born in Cuba. So Marco Rubio, there's the Cuban community, along with Marco Rubio, does not want the Communist Party in Cuba to remain in power. They've been advocating for a regime change in Cuba. So when Obama lessened the sanctions in Cuba during Obama's administration, the Cuban Americans were not happy about it. You would think they would be happy about it, but no, when you loosen the sanctions, and it helped Cuba a lot, but the Cuban Americans didn't want to see that happen because it makes the Cuban government more powerful and it lets them remain in power. And this is Marco Rubio has been on the record and he's talked about this and expressed his desire as well to overthrow the Cuban government or to replace it. They want to replace it and they want to bring Cuba back to a re-emerging Cuba. That makes sense. And so, in short, Marco Rubio wants to take back his homeland, along with millions of other Cuban Americans in the United States. They want to take Cuba back. So if you restrict Venezuela from sending oil to Cuba, you start to put even more pressure on the government. However, there's a problem with that. Cuba doesn't only get its energy from Venezuela. Mexico is also shipping gasoline to Cuba. So how does this happen? Well, remember the press conference when Marco Rubio and Trump were talking back and forth during a press conference, and they said, Mexico needs to be careful next. We're going to have to talk to Mexico. I think it was something paraphrasing that we're going to have to talk to Mexico. And what that was is telling Mexico that you're going to have to stop sending gas shipments to Cuba. So basically, they want to tear down Cuba more, put more pressure on the Cuban government. And at some point, now this part is still to be determined, how are they going to overthrow the government? Will the Cubans rise up against the government? Will we do an operation in Cuba? None of that's known, and I'm not going to proclaim that I do know. But this is a 2-for-1 special. Remove Maduro, replace their government, restrict the oil to Cuba, and the future plan, he's got 3 more years to do it, meaning Rubio and the administration, to take back, to try and do something with Cuba. That is the plan.
Well,
What do people think in the comments?
I've been trying to keep up. There's been a lot of comments. I don't have enough knowledge on all of this to really have anything to say, so I'm just kind of listening.
Okay, I've just paused for you in case I figured you normally will say something. So Lisa G. Marie, insane. I know, Lisa, you're here often, which is awesome to see. Some people trust me when I tell you, no, don't trust me. Don't trust me at all. Actually, that's the worst thing I could say. Don't trust me. Do your own research. Go to UNFTR Media, watch his video, listen to Mr. Global, the energy expert, and start doing deeper research. And then go back and listen to the press conference between Trump and Rubio. You have to read a little bit between the lines, and then you will see this all starts to make sense. Look at who they're threatening and why. It does often come back to energy resources, and in this case, it does. Oh, and by the way, the only thing I forgot to mention about about Venezuela, and I do need to do some more research on this because I had people in the comments tell me that Don Jr. is part of a company for resources. I think it's resources. I think it's gold resources. But again, this is part of it. So people always say that, or even I say that Trump always does something for self-enrichment. The Trump associates, the Trump family, there's always some self-enrichment piece of the puzzle. And there does seem to be a piece of the puzzle that I have to do more research on. So we can all do that together. People in the comments, I believe there's a Don Jr. is part of a company that has either, I don't know if it's gold, mineral mining, and so forth, but Venezuela also has a lot of gold and other resources. So you can almost certainly follow the money of what investments are made in Venezuela by certain American companies, and then go see who's invested in those companies. And you're most likely going to see names like Kushner, possibly, or Don Jr., or Steve Witkoff, or any other Trump associates and business leaders. Because these types of things, even though this is a giant geopolitical move by the United States, it has tentacles in energy. It has tentacles in at controlling our hemisphere. And of course, has tentacles in self-enrichment, because it always does. What I can tell everyone, there's 2 things that has absolutely nothing to do with that they will sell you a bill of goods on, and that is bringing democracy back to Venezuela, because that is just proof right there. I got guaranteed proof. If they cared about bringing democracy back to Venezuela, excuse me, did I say Cuba? if they care about bringing democracy back to Venezuela, Trump, as soon as the raid was done, would be demanding that the vice president of Venezuela step down and they install the elected president of Venezuela that was democratically elected. Was it back in 2016 or 18? I forget the year. But they would guarantee, so if they cared about democracy, they would absolutely be forcing or demanding that the proper leader be installed. You haven't heard a word about that. They don't care. And it also has nothing to do about human rights for Venezuelans. They don't care. And now I hope there's probably some Venezuelans here, there were a lot last night as well, that they are hopeful and they are happy that Maduro is gone, and that's awesome. I'm happy for you. And with hope comes the possibility of some change, because if Maduro stayed in power, at least you didn't have any hope. But things could definitely get worse before they get better. I hope that's not true. And I understand why they have hope, and I understand why they're happy. Ultimately, this is, if you just look at the outcome, maybe it seems good to you. The reason it's not good in terms of, as me, as an American particularly, because we do things by the rule of law, or at least we're supposed to, and based on values. And just because you do something that the outcome makes you happy doesn't mean it was right. And like someone used an analogy in a sports game last night, if you do something against the rules and you get away with it, that might be good for you short term. But if you continue to do that, you lose the game and you lose the league because you lose all credibility. So it's just like, I think there was a great analogy about this from Paul Warburg, the geopolitical strategist. He basically said it like this. If this is a transactional deal, if you have a police department and you're in your neighborhood and you have a police department and you have a neighborhood and you have someone, a big drug warlord in your neighborhood selling drugs out of the house, and they go in and the police goes in and decides to raid that house and they remove the drug dealer. You as a neighbor might say, that's awesome. That guy needed to be gone. However, now the police department takes over that house. Now they own that house. Now that house should have gone back to someone else. It's owned to the family of someone, but the police takes over that house and they get something out of it because there's a lot of value in that property. So now you have police departments that are only going to seek to do justice to wherever there's value. So instead of protecting the people, so they might let go of people who are robbing a convenience store, because if they arrest them, there's nothing in it for them. You're not arresting them because the law says they broke the law and that's why you're arresting them. You're only arresting people who are the most nefarious and where you can get something out of it for. And that's what happens with Venezuela. They have a lot to give possibly us for the U.S. oil companies and other companies to extract oil, extract minerals, extract wealth from Venezuela. But if you only utilize that power based on a transactional relationship when it's good for us, and you ignore the smaller things, you don't have a rules-based world order, and you're not applying the law fairly across the spectrum. That is the problem with these things. So what Trump did, and Marco Rubio did, was illegal, not only by our Constitution, but also by international law. And you can say we don't abide by international law, but neither did Maduro. But we removed him, and we're using the pretense that he broke the law, international law, so we're removing him, even though we're breaking the law. Two wrongs don't make a right, and that is the difference. Now, you might be happy about it, and you say, well, the outcome is okay, is good. Be careful. You're better off long-term having a call go against you if you're playing a sport. Even if you think the call was bad, it is abiding by the rules. And long-term, having a rules-based world order is much more beneficial for the entire team, which in this case is our country, and the entire world, which would be the sports league, the entire sports network. So be careful when you think that you got to win and it's short-term, because now when China invades Taiwan and we just have to say, well, there's nothing we can do because the American is acting like an imperialistic nation as well. And when Russia claims that they're okay invading Ukraine, we are falling into the same mafia-style behavior. And that's actually what a mafia behavior is, like the police department analogy. It ends up being a mafia police state. And when we do the same things that other countries are trying to say is okay, then we're no different than them. And that's the problem. We established a new world order after 1940. We said we're going to be rules-based and value-based, and we're going to solve things diplomatically, not through force, not through might. And that is supposed to be the difference between American values, freedom, liberty, the rule of law, constant changing governments, changing leadership, not dictators, and so forth. I'll take a breath.
You've had some guests come up. Did you want me to look at all that, or are you kind of refraining from that?
So we have Dave Highway. Yeah, let's take a few guests. Let me take a few comments first, and then Dave and Sabusio. And I had some people on Instagram too, but I think they dropped. Was there anything in the comments? Thanks for all the likes, everybody. I do need to do a little self-promotion in terms of why am I even talking about these things? I'm just going to pop it up because I've seen people in the comments already mention it, which is great. And I appreciate those that mentioned in the comments, because you might be thinking I'm just talking about Venezuela and what the United States done is ultimately wrong. But I have a phrase or a quote that government shouldn't be this corrupt, and it doesn't have to be. And that's always my goal when I talk about these issues, is if we're going to restore America to government for the people, by the people, we have to figure out how we can pass a 28th Amendment, because there's nothing else that's going to restore our representation back to the people. Because right now, and I'm going to pop this down and show the other one. Right now, our system of government is being influenced, meaning Trump and even the Democratic Party, is by all the different corporate special interests, religious ideologues, corporate corruptors, and foreign states. Our entire political system has been influenced and taken away from us by greed. So our government is not for the people, by the people anymore. It's for the oil companies, by the oil companies. It's for the foreign states, by the foreign states. It's for the Heritage Foundation, by the Heritage Foundation. It's for AIPAC, by AIPAC. We all know this is true. And I know the comments will change now, because people are like, what the hell? Like, I thought you were a raging liberal here for a minute by the way you're talking. But no, this is about corruption. This is about the greed stealing the United States government from the people. And it's all these forces that are behind me. And then the only way, and no one is still to this day, I've been doing this now for 6 months, I'm trying to look for another solution. People will say, just repeal Citizens United and this gets done. That will not fix it, because Citizens United, first of all, the Supreme Court has says it has to be done at the constitutional level. They will not repeal Citizens United, because there's been so much case law where they interpreted people, individuals, citizens, as corporations as well, and money is speech. So if you ever want to restore America back to the people, you have to make sure you eradicate the idea that corporations, meaning artificial entities, are people, because we all know they're not. It's fucking just a stupid interpretation, a manipulated ruling that literally is against the Constitution, right? Because there is nothing in the Constitution, nothing in the Bill of Rights that expresses any freedoms or liberties for artificial entities or companies. There is nothing in the Constitution that expresses that money is speech. So this is a fabricated case law by the Supreme Court that's also been corrupted by the same types of influences to interpret something that doesn't exist. The Bill of Rights is for individual freedoms and liberties, for individuals. And I don't know how anyone can talk about individuals, anything other than human beings or citizens. So any interpretation by the legal system or the perverted legal system that can make the jump from something that doesn't exist in the Constitution then to redefining what a person is. Like, are you fucking kidding me? People don't realize how fucking stupid is this, that we allowed this to happen. So that's why when I point to this and people will say, this will never happen. This can't happen. They're never going to pass a 28th Amendment. That might be right. But if you have 50 million people that say bullshit, we're going to demand it. There are many ways you can force the people in charge in leadership to pass the 28th Amendment and make sure that 3/4 of the states will pass this amendment. I would love for there to be something easier, maybe something that seemed more attainable, but it doesn't exist. And in some ways, I actually think really big, bold ideas like this are more inspirational, more likely to work versus less likely to work. Because I think you can get people to be inspired, because this right here is a 28th Amendment, eradicates almost like 80, 90%, a vast majority of all the problems we face in this country are based on greed and the power and people in control taking control over our government. If representatives actually represented their constituents and their constituents only, first and foremost, everything would change. It doesn't mean you would win on every issue. It doesn't mean you'd always get your way, whether you're MAGA or you're liberal or anywhere in between. It doesn't mean you would always win on issues. But all you could respect is if congressional leaders and our presidents were not enriching themselves, and if they had to truly answer to the people, in general, it's sort of like the basketball game. We would all win. We would all win tremendously because the greed would be eliminated. There would still be things that they would decide on that you wouldn't like. I get that. But that's not what winning looks like. Winning looks like playing by a fair game that actually represents all of us, not just the top 0.01% of those in control. And that's the thing that when I do this, a lot of people always know that this is true. Like Lenny says here, if 10 million of us stop paying federal taxes, that's billions. That's right. But I think it's actually, there's whether you should protest or you should vote with your wallets, that's all great. You can do that. You should do that. But I actually don't think it's actually going to make a change. It's like a temporary protest. It's not going to work. And how do you get 10 million people to rally not to pay their taxes? If you can get 10 million people to rally to not pay your taxes, I would tell you, well, screw them not paying their taxes. Get 10 million people to rally about the 28th Amendment, and that's going to fix things for a century, never mind just temporarily. And you're going to get much deeper fixes versus something that's just holding back your taxes or not spending money on a certain day or whatever it might be. So I had someone ask, Tabitha, can you move the amendments over? Which way? Down? Down, left, right? Probably left. I'm thinking left because I know there's things on the right. Thanks, Tabitha, for mentioning that. Yeah, Cindy says winning is when you have integrities, morals, and only truth. That's right. You have to lead with values. You have to lead with integrity. You can't lead. Black out the system. Oh, welcome. So, Corey, my apologies for not responding to your DM. I actually just remembered it now. I've been meaning to write you back for a while. How do we get 10 million people to agree? It's a great question. Actually, you don't have to get 10 million people to agree. There's well more than 10 million people that agree. I know that's just a question how you phrased it probably. It's not about 10 million people agree. There are 100 million people or more, because I've done so many videos and tens of thousands of comments about how many people actually agree. It's how do you reach those 10 million, right? How do you get them to focus on one particular thing? Oh, cool. Awesome. Corey, you're here. So I'm going to have you come up. How do you get the information out, right? And then I think it's the same thing that you're doing, what I'm trying to do, and so forth. Hello, sir.
He might be getting ready.
He requested up. Blackout, you here? Nope, he jumped out. All right, so he's not quite ready. Corey, I saw your comment. If you want to jump in, I think it's Corey. If you want to jump in, let me know. So Cindy, again, I'm looking at the comments to see if someone has different ideas about these things. But again, and then I'm going to mention, if there was a 28th Amendment, then you may as well do a 29th Amendment. No problem, Corey. Sorry, I cut out. Yeah, jump in when you want to jump in again. Maybe you're here already. Yep, you're here.
Sorry about that, TK.
No, man, no problems. Good to hear from you. Good to meet you finally.
Yes, you as well. That's where somebody was dropped some of your articles from Medium the other day, and we were already following you anyways. So it's just so awesome that, when we are hearing the same things that are on the similar paths that we're doing, and it's like we're all walking towards that same goal. So It's really cool that we're all just trying to bring this to people's attention and to take those steps forward. And kind of what I wanted to add was one of our favorite ways of trying to bring together those 10 million people is it's like, well, you don't convince somebody that a car is better than a horse, right? Because if you're going to be arguing for days when nobody knows what a car is, what you do is you go and you build the car. And then all the people that thought the horse was better, well, they'll go along with it. You know what I mean? And if we can show people that there is a better way, and that's where we're trying to take back that power economically to get rid of that structure that we're boxed into, because if we change leaders and change laws, the people that are still controlling our food and our medicine and our healthcare are still going to be those corporations, you know? So we really need that long-term change, and just appreciate everything that you're doing. And it's so cool. So we'll have to connect soon and see how we can link up.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you just mentioned, right, we all have to do whatever we think is, whatever resonates. You can think of it, and I hate to use this analogy, but if I have to give Trump credit for anything, is because he's such an idiot. He's able to distill things down sometimes in the most simplest manners. And that that allows people to connect to something. And again, I don't... There's something always very difficult about taking something that's complex and distilling it down to something simple. But simple-minded people have an ability to do that. So I think it's really important that no matter what we're trying to do, whether it's me trying to promote a 28th Amendment or you trying to make sure people vote with their wallets into a forced change, is that we don't know what the right message is. We don't know exactly what that thing is, that small soundbite that everybody gravitates to, right? I think personally, I'm trying to do the 28th Amendment. It's a huge, delusional, possibly some people say delusional goal. I get that. But at the end of the day, if whoever can figure out a way to reach 10 million or 50 million people, then they have the leverage. No different than what MAGA has done to Trump. MAGA has elevated Trump and allowed him to act with impunity. So once you have people who are supporting your effort, and it has to be a large number of people, then you can act with impunity if you're trying to do something nefarious. But then the opposite side of that is if you're trying to do something good or restore order or bring back greatness, however you want to phrase it, you have to have the same type of support, because that support allows you to do what your goal is to do, right? So we're all trying to figure out, how do we reach millions of people and get them to take an action, or at least not even take an action, just support that ambition, because that's how great things happen.
100%. And I think it's going to happen through all of us, right? And that's where with ours, it is initially, well, we want to vote with our dollar, but it's actually one step further. We're trying to get people to scratch that very next surface and ask that question: why is this so tough? Why is it so tough to not buy corporate? Why is it that everything is dominated by a corporation in my town? And then even the next question that we really like to get people to ask is, why don't they pay that Walmart employee enough to care? Because it used to be that if you walked in there and that employee rolled their eyes, well, you're going to walk out and you're going to go to the local version of that store. But now they do not need to pay their employees enough to care, because there is no competition. And because there is no competition, it's difficult for us to vote with our dollars. So if we understand that the other levers of power, the politics and the media, are no longer in our favor, well, then the economy is not as well too. So we need to take some of that power back, regain the leverage, because as long as the corporations control our food and our seeds and our healthcare and our medicine, then they're going to have a lot of power and control over us. So some of the ways that we can take that power and control back is by taking back control of the essentials, because then if they are not in control of the things that we need to live, we've got more power and leverage to implement new amendments. You know what I mean? And so that's how I see that all of it, right now we are structurally boxed in by the system because it is set up to exploit us rather than take care of us.
Yeah, I want to mention something I think it might be interesting. So, whether you're working from the local level or the ground up or from the top down, like all of it matters. Like everyone should try and however we should impact the system, we should. I do want to say that if this corruption, so going back to your Walmart not paying people always say, how are you going to get to have more competition, or how are you going to get Walmart to do these things? Well, there's a couple ways. Let's think about it from top down for a moment. If you eliminated the corruption from the political system and you had corporations paying their fair share of taxes, and you had not just billionaires, billionaires and 100 millionaires paying their fair share of taxes. People often say, corporations used to pay 30% of all the federal revenue coming in each year to the federal government. Now it's 8%. So corporations have been getting incredible tax breaks. And I would say, fuck that. Corporations need to be paying their fair share of taxes, and it needs to go back to 30% of all the federal revenue. And the richest of the richest need to be paying their fair share. And people all start to defend corporations and say, no, because if they get taxed more, they're going to raise prices. And then that's going to make things more expensive, and it's going to create inflation. That is a short-sighted view, because you're just being scared into believing that's true, because that's not how the free market economy works. Because if Walmart gets taxed more and the producers get taxed more, will they raise prices? Yes, they will. So those people are right. However, that's where competition comes into place. They already have profit margins that are far higher than like a little person can do on a smaller scale. Their profit margins might be smaller, but because their scale is so much bigger. So you would allow, by opening up, so if they raise their prices too much, now you can have more competitors come into the market, and the small players could become reality again, because we live in a capitalist society. If the profit margins are too fat, you will have more competition, because that means there's an opening for those people. So by raising taxes on corporations and on billionaires, the scare tactic of inflation is bullshit. You will have capitalism take hold, and you might even have local hardware stores again, or local markets again for groceries and so forth. You can't be fooled into the scare tactics that just higher taxes, because there were billionaires or people that were extremely wealthy in the 60s and 70s, including corporations, that made enormous amount of profit even when they were paying legitimate tax rates, unlike they are today. So don't buy into the scare tactics is what I would tell people.
100%. That's why them owning all the levers of power. If we had the media telling us the truth, we wouldn't believe, right? They wouldn't have lied to us and tell us all this. And even then it comes back to the politicians are even funded. The politicians are beholden not to the people that are paying their salary, but to the people that are paying their campaign finance, right? Funding their campaign. And so then that would be the corporations. And it is all this big circle of, we don't have any of the power because we don't control what we need to live, our food, housing, and our healthcare. So corporations can dominate us, and we are almost at the natural end of that. And I'll land the plane here. Somebody said, well, how do we start? And well, what we're trying to do is start small, because the boycott is really just the first step of getting people to think about, well, where am I spending my money? Can I spend it somewhere local? Then the next step is, dang, it is really difficult to get somewhere local, especially for a lot of what we need to live, our food, our housing, our healthcare. So what we are doing is making it easier for people to buy local by forming food buying groups. That is one of the first things that we're doing across the country, is getting 50, 75, 100 people that are committed to buying, a dozen eggs a week. And even if it's small, we are getting rid of our dependence on having to buy with, from groceries and from corporations. It's about building that new system, showing people the proof of concept, and then hopefully spreading that strategy everywhere.
Right on. Well, keep up the good fight. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you coming up, and it was good to finally meet you.
Thanks for the time, TK.
Right.
We'll talk soon. Have a good one,
ya.
everybody. Appreciate it.
All right. So like Corey I think it's Corey. Is it Corey? Let me know in the comments. I think so. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't even mention a first name, but it's only a first name. These, like he was mentioning, the media is not doing their job. And I have the list, the chart right behind me, the diagram behind me. He was talking about all the corporate special interests, but I have obviously a much more comprehensive behind me in terms of all the different forces that I've mapped out from the religious forces that are controlling the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 and AIPAC and the pro-IS forces that are infiltrating and embedded deeply in our government that are trying to turn us into a religious state. So the religious ideologues are trying to turn us into a religious state. The corporate corruptors in the middle, of course, are trying to exploit us at all times for as much of their wealth or much of their self-enrichment as possible. When it comes to the tech billionaires up top, you have them not only controlling the AI and the social media, but they control literally everything we see and everything we hear, because the tech billionaires control an enormous amount of traditional media and social media. And they want to turn us into a surveillance state. And that's what they're doing. And they want to control the technology economy. And they want to turn us into a corporate dictatorship, right? These people do not support the Constitution. They do not support democracy. Both the religious ideologues and the tech billionaires, they don't care about democracy. Only thing they care about is enriching themselves and having as much control and power as possible. And that's why I always rail against them, that our government was not designed this way. Our government is supposed to be for the people, by the people, but it's not. It's for all these groups, even the foreign governments, right? The foreign governments have far more influence in our government, including them, and all of them have so much influence with our politicians and with this administration that's where at the root, we have to remove the influence from money, because if you kill the money, then you kill these corporations, because that's what they all are. All of these things are corporations. When you think of corporations, don't think of just corporations as Walmart and as Exxon. That's not what I'm talking about. These organizations like the Heritage Foundation and the APAC, these are political organizations under corporations, 527s and super PACs. And that's why they have the same protection as like a Walmart would have as a regular corporation. When people say corporations are people, no, what we're really saying is political organizations are people. And the reason these political organizations exist is to infiltrate and infect our political system. That's the only reason super PACs exist. They are not corporations in the sense of a corporation as most people think of it as a Walmart or an Exxon. These are political corporations, and their only role, the only thing they're trying to do is make sure that they have as much influence in our government as possible, not the people. So I'm going to bring Shirley up, and Dave Highway, you're going to join the panel. And I'm going to change the view, and we might go back to, I know off track from Venezuela and from Greenland, but I'm going to bring that back up. Shirley, welcome.
Hi. I just wanted to come up when it came to like stuff like Walmart and stuff like that. There are things like farmers markets, and I know a lot of farmers who sell meat to people, but because they can't sell it at Walmart prices, they don't get a lot of traction.
Right, in terms of the farmers markets?
Yes, and like there are farmers who you can buy beef from. They'll sell it to you. Can they do it at Walmart prices? No, they can't do it at Walmart prices. So yes, Walmart's cheaper.
Well, you're also getting farm to table, essentially. You're getting it direct from the farmer, and it's not being processed, and it's not being stored in freezers for a month at a time, and so forth.
Yeah, and farmers markets too, like you're not getting Walmart prices, but you meet the person who grew it. They'll answer any question about anything they've used in their garden. It's not, it's not a secret what they use if they're very honest about it. But again, you can't do it at Walmart prices.
Yes, as Maureen says, yes, more money, but better quality, right?
And people don't buy their own food anymore. People don't make their own food anymore. I was actually talking to my mom about this last week, and she was like, when I was growing up, you didn't have shelf-stable bread. Like, you had to make it yourself if you wanted bread.
Bread is only 3 ingredients: water, yeast, and flour.
And salt if you're picky.
And salt if you're picky, yeah, exactly, right? So I actually purchase all my bread fresh, and I put it in the freezer, and I make sure it only has 3 or 4 ingredients. Those 3 or 4 ingredients. I go to a local bakery, and because I look at a bread, even the fresh bread at a supermarket, if you look at the ingredients, it's got like 20 ingredients in it. You're like, what the hell are these different gums? Bread doesn't have the gums so much in it, but all these different artificial and highly processed ingredients. Bread, just like they do in Europe, they go out every day, they buy their bread fresh, and then they eat it fresh, and it's so much better. But thanks for coming up, Shirley. Appreciate it. Thanks for your perspective. All right, Dave on Highway 39. I don't know if that means you're a trucker. Let me know. I know when people wait too long, they're not ready. Dave, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, and I'm very, it's really a very interesting, in-depth conversation, way above my pay scale. But as a Canadian in the rural territories up in northern western British Columbia, I just feel like Venezuela. I don't know where we are on the conversation. I've been working a little bit, so I walked away from the phone. But like the Venezuela ordeal. It just seems to me like a preparation for coming down on Canada, and so that's going to really be it's going to be like the Irish Troubles, only Canadian.
Yeah, it does seem like our government, the United States government, is certainly acting with imperialistic aspirations. They talked about Canada being a 51st state. They've talked about Greenland. Obviously, they've mentioned Mexico and even Venezuela. It's like they are literally actively destroying the world order, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so I apologize. I'm just going to keep on listening because this is a really in depth. Like you must be some kind of an economist or something like that. The way you're talking.
No, don't mistake. I just do a lot of research, and then I try and piece things together. I try and be good at connecting dots and explaining things, and I'm certainly not right all the time. But when you put enough information, you start going down the right rabbit's hole to actually find and uncover the truth. And you have to be careful, of course, not to get caught up in what seems conspiratorial, like this aspirations with Cuba. I thought in the beginning it sounded conspiratorial, but when you actually look at what Marco Rubio has talked about in the past, he's expressed his desire to remove the regime, or has expressed his desire that he would like to have regime replacement or a different government in Cuba. So when I always say that people always tell you and show you who they are. They always tell you. All you have to do is watch and listen. And when people like Trump or Rubio or anybody else, you can immediately tell by what they tell you who they are and what they stand for. So when people, especially dictators, tell you they're going to take Ukraine, believe them. When China Xi tells you they want to take Taiwan, people say, well, they haven't fired a shot yet. What, you're going to wait for them to fire a shot? When Hitler wrote Mein Kampf in 1922, they said, well, that's never going to happen. Well, it happened. And when we talk about taking Venezuela or Greenland or possibly Canada, you better pay attention, because that's what they really want to do. Whether they'll get away with it is a different story, and it's dependent on people if they will stop them or not.
Yeah, and we have to remember, I think also that, I think it was that guy that lives in the Barbie mansion, I don't know his name, Besnet. Besnet was talking about Trump, and he was describing Trump, and he said that there was this strategy. It's like this economic theory, and it's like calculated chaos or something like that, or organized confusion. I forget exactly what the term was, but so when he's not mentioning Canada, and he's mentioning Cuba, and he's mentioning Greenland, and he's acting on Venezuela, you know what? I'm reading the stuff that's not being said.
Yeah, you have to read between the lines. And if you go back to the press conference on Rubio and Trump, that's what all of us start to do, is read what they're, see what they're saying or what they're joking about, like talking about Mexico and talking about Cuba. Those names did come up in that press conference. They didn't give great detail on it, but what it did was give you insight to how they're thinking. When they warned Mexico and they warned Cuba that maybe they're next, they're signaling, right? And they're sort of dipping their toes in the water to see, this is kind of what we're doing. Again, people always tell you who they are and what they want.
And the American people have to do something about this, because if the rest of the world does, it's war. It's world war. If the American people do something about this, it's basically the recovery of the Constitution, if that's possible.
That's right. Absolutely. People don't understand that because of the United States' position, geography in the world, and what we established at the beginning of our government with the Constitution and the rules-based world order after World War II, that if America fails to live up to its American values or continue with a rules-based value system order, the entire world will drop into chaos. We are, by our positioning, the heartbeat of democracy. And that is why literally every foreign government that's an adversary of the United States is trying to divide America, because if you make America weaker and if you can tear it down, then you can do whatever you want. I know that sounds like America exceptionalism. It's not. It's the reality of the world that the United States, along with its allies, meaning those of you in Canada and all of Europe and our Asian allies, established this world order. But it cannot survive long term without the United States, because if you think of the body of the world, it is literally like the heart, because of its geography, because of its resources, because it was able to start something relatively brand new back in 1789, right? That changed everything. This can't be replicated again. And that, again, some people think that sounds like American exceptionalism. It's just a fact. And people from around the world, I have them as guests all the time, and they talk about military air bases and so forth, or air bases, that this is just how, if America ceases to be the policeman of the world or the heartbeat of democracy of the world, some other power that doesn't have values, that's just run by a dictator, will take that vacuum, and you'll be under the rule of a different power that may not have a value system, and then the world becomes much worse. So if that power is not a democracy, and there's always someone else that's going to assume power. That's how it's always worked throughout history. It used to be the British Empire and the Roman Empire and so forth. There's always someone that is setting the rules of the global landscape. That someone could be very nefarious, or that someone could be a system like we have, or we're supposed to have, that is trying to keep rules in place and freedoms and liberties. It's not that complicated.
Yeah, this is where we kind of, I think we, as in humanity, if you will, and sort of the political, the interwoven world, if you will. I like Marshall McLuhan, so I'll kind of refer maybe a little bit to his thinking. But the United States has been able to exercise both hard and soft powers, not so much the hard powers, but the soft powers with mastery over the course of many decades, and that has kind of seems to me that Trump has said, no, we're not going to go there anymore. And I don't know if it's just Trump, or is it that Project 25, or is it the conscience of the United States? I don't know, because I only know one American, and she's a Latino woman, and Latina woman, and she is, she has to hide in her basement, literally.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, because of ICE.
It's really sad. Yeah, exactly. I would say because of Donald Trump.
Right.
But is it?
Right. Well, you just have to understand, everybody in the call needs to understand that Trump doesn't understand what values and integrity is. Like, when I say that, I don't mean that like frivolously. He literally doesn't understand. If you're not trustworthy yourself, you don't know what someone who's trustworthy looks like and how they act. If you don't have character, you don't know what someone who has character looks like. When you only interact based on a transaction, that is your only way you operate. So you literally can't comprehend how the other person thinks and behaves. And that's the problem with Trump. He doesn't respect the values-based world order because he doesn't understand it. To him, it's like his foreign concept. Transactions are like for him breathing. These value systems, they're complex, and soft power is a value system. And people say, well, we spend a lot of money and helping and all over the world. No, that's soft power. That generosity is not to be generous. It comes back to us, and it pays back itself in so many other ways: access to minerals, access to relationships, and so forth. So soft power doesn't cost us anything. But to Donald Trump, he's someone that sees soft power as just an expense because he can't calculate the return on the investment. So all he can do is realize, oh, soft power is stupid because all we do is, ship out $180 billion a year to other countries, but we get nothing back in return. That's what he thinks. But that's not how soft power works.
Right. It's almost like a thing, what would you call it? A dialectical relationship between, I've lost my thought. I apologize.
That's all right. It's really simple. All relationships to him are, what if I give something, what do I get something back? right? That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's a very simplistic, second grade type thing. If I trade you a baseball card and I get a different one in return, is it better or is it worse? Like the really, really simple mindset of a transactional relationship. That's all he knows.
Yeah, reciprocity is not in his vocabulary.
Right. That's right. Thanks for joining. I appreciate you having here, and thanks for your point of views.
Thank you. I'm gonna book off and just listen.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Next up, Dr. Mellon.
Hey there.
Hi there. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. This is a great conversation.
Where are you from?
I live in Texas. What about you?
Okay. Yeah, I'm in the States. I don't like to disclose exact locations, but I'm in the States, in the western side.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, the less information, the better. I appreciate that.
All right. So we're talking mostly about, we've been all over the map, of course. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to speak about in particular. Venezuela happens to be the major topic today. I'm going to come back later talking about more about the Greenland situation, but they of course do interconnect a lot between geopolitics.
Is there an update on Greenland other than what Trump has said in the past?
Yes, there is today. And that's why I almost didn't want to talk about Venezuela today, because it's this update right here. Stephen Miller came out today on Jake Tapper's CNN show, and he had, quote, I forgot to put in the first quotes here. He said, "We live in a world, in the real world, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power," is what Stephen Miller said. These are the iron laws of the world since the beginning of time. So it was a response to Greenland in terms of, are we going to take Greenland by force if we need to? And this was his quote.
Oh, okay. And that was in response to that, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that there was some contention over Greenland. I thought Greenland was just kind of a sovereign country to begin with. Is there, and I guess I have to ask you, is there currently a power grab in Greenland between America and other countries?
Well, Denmark controls Greenland, and Trump has said for a while now that he wants to take Greenland because he wants their resources, right? There's two major geopolitical benefits if whoever controls Greenland. Number one, Greenland is known to be an incredible, massive, untapped source of minerals. So if the ice sheets continue to wane, there's more and more access to Greenland's minerals. Of course, geopolitically, it also has more access to the Arctic Ocean, which is also strategic for the United States. So Trump has said he wants Greenland, and Stephen Miller is just poking that, basically signaling that Greenland should be part of the United States, and that if we need to take it by force, that we will, or at least he's threatening to do. The only other thing I'd like to say to everyone that's here watching this is some people might be reading this quote from Stephen Miller and say, well, that's true. We live in a real world that's governed by strength, that's governed by force, that's governed by power. No, that is not the world. Don't buy into his bullshit. Since the end of World War II, we are a rules-based world order that is governed by values and rules that is backed by strength, that is backed by force, and that is backed by power. That is an accurate and fair statement. So you rule by our values and rules, and you only use your might as a threat to ensure that that world order stays intact. And that's what the U.S. military has been doing, policing the world's oceans, and to ensure that trade can travel freely without pirating, without sanctions, without tariffs, and so forth. So we, or FDR, I don't say we, FDR and Churchill and all of our allies set up a different world order that was different from every other practical world order that existed before it, because it wasn't governed by strength and governed by force. It's just backed by force. It's backed by strength. And those are two very different concepts. Because if you live in Stephen Miller's world of reality and concepts, the world will be extremely dangerous, and it will be a fight for imperialistic empire building versus the current world that's based on peace, freedom, liberties, democracy, diplomatic, figuring out things diplomatically, and rules and laws. That's the world that I think most peace-loving people around the world want to live in, and they don't want to live in a world that's just governed by strength and governed by force.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I agree with most of what you're saying. The only thing I push back on a little bit is whether or not other countries really subscribe to our Americanized worldview of how things are done, right? And we already know with like countries getting off the petrodollar, less countries wanting to be um, aligned with the United States. Maybe they want to be aligned with Russia or China. So I think there is an ongoing shift happening, and there is a power struggle that we're seeing, and our economy is being challenged a bit with the way it's been being ran with our monetary system. I don't want to like go on and on about that,
But no
but
doubt.
but the world is unstable, and
But
I'm
what?
just skeptical. I'm just skeptical that other countries really, because I don't think your worldview is wrong whatsoever. I like being kind and whatnot, but I don't know if the way we look at how other countries treat their people, I think that really shows who we're playing against.
Oh, of
I think
course.
it really shows. So I don't know. I'm in the middle. Stephen Miller is kind of radical, but I can't. I don't know. I
Well,
don't know what to
let
say.
me say it this way. This is very binary. When a rules-based world order is improving, when democracy is expanding, and this is the reason why FDR and Churchill promoted democracy as much as you can, is when democracy and self-rule are expanding, authoritarians and dictators are decreasing. They are losing power. When democracy is failing or weakening, then authoritarians, autocracies, dictatorships are expanding. It's completely binary. It's one or the other. So the only option is if you want a rules-based world order where people control their governments and there's democracies and self-representation or self-rule, and as the higher level say, it says self-rule, then you want to always promote self-rule because by design, that will sniff out or weaken the dictators around the world. So when you see China rising into dictatorship or essentially, a cult of personality like we have, or whether it's India or whether it's Bibi or Russia, when you see more dictators or Maduro in Venezuela, the more dictators are getting more power. That just is a direct correlation between the self-rules-based world order is starting to wane. So there's only one choice. You either push back because like Stephen Miller says, it's governed by force. I would just say it's backed by force because if the United States military is the strongest military and we are backing democracy in a rules-based world order, then you are taking away the power. There's no way to ever solve this. There's no utopia around the world. We have psychopaths and sociopaths that want more power. We're always going to have that as long as humans are around. And there's only one thing that those people understand, and that is the threat of power and the threat of force. And without that threat, and like when America is becoming weaker, they will always become more powerful and they will then look to succeed on whatever ambitions they have. It's very, very binary.
Yeah, you really illustrated that well. Just that it is binary, and I see what you're saying about the United States being the enforcers a bit of what we represent, I guess. But
Yep. I mean, we are the United States is the global policeman, whether people like it or not. If the United States goes away and loses its power, someone else is going to do it. It's just a really simple, and people think it's a burden and it's a responsibility we shouldn't bear. That's nonsense. It's a privilege. With great power comes great responsibility. That is a timeless tale or timeless phrase. It is truth. With great power, economic power, political power, and military power, we have that responsibility, and it is a privilege. It is not a curse. It is not a burden. It is a privilege because it allows that country, in this case, the United States, to sort of set the rules. And people don't understand that that privilege also comes with incredible amount of advantages to how people treat you. Like someone in the comments just mentioned that Europe views us as the enemy now. And I understand that point of view. So a lot of countries are starting to view America as the enemy. I don't think they view the United States as the enemy. The United States current government and a part of the population that doesn't understand geopolitics enough or has lost their way in American values, when large Americans are ignoring the historical significance of the Constitution and the American values, yeah, then I can see why other countries and other populations are going to start to obviously not trust America anymore, because the American population is showing that the United States can no longer be trusted to sort of be that police force. And that is scary because there's no one else has good intentions that wants to replace us.
Yeah, with Venezuela, it's almost like police brutality, right?
It's exactly right. I mentioned
Like
that
police
yesterday.
brutality. Oh, is that what you said? That's funny. I just thought about that.
It's like when you get pulled over, someone gets pulled over, and you have a bad cop that doesn't understand the rules, and they're infringing on your rights, or there's something worse like police brutality. That's exactly what's happening. You're having
No, it is a good analogy though, and I think it's almost perfect because the American public's reaction is good. It's healthy. I'm hearing a lot of pushback about Venezuela, how it was handled. Trump, of course, and if people weren't pushing back, that would actually be really concerning. I think just that would be really concerning as a country. But but also it's like when somebody gets pulled over and they get arrested, it is because they've been doing things that have led them down that path, which I think we all realize. And I still don't know.
a lot of people get pulled over in the States for not doing anything wrong.
But I still don't know. No, I know. But in this situation, we're talking about Maduro, and obviously he is guilty of some crimes. He's definitely guilty of working with some shrug people and enabling it and whatnot.
I'm not defending Maduro at all. Yeah.
No, I know you're not. I know you're not.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you get my point here. Is that what was the alternative? Well, what is the alternative if we're talking about enforcing rule and fighting back against fascism? Then I would argue that getting rid of a dictator is probably more of a plus than a negative.
It's not the result. It's how you do it. How you do it matters. It's not just that you have the short term. So Venezuelans are happy, and most Venezuelans seem hopeful and happy right now. And that's great. I'm happy for them, and I hope it works out for them. But how matters. When the previous president, who is duly elected, who won the election and was not installed in office, how you should do it is stand on your values, not talk about drugs and not create a lie. How you do it is if Trump literally cared about democracy and the Venezuelans, you would go to the UN, you would go to your allies, and you would start building your case and say, listen, we promote democracy. The entire Western world promotes democracy. We are going to make sure that their democracy is not being adhered to. And if the Venezuelans wanted a democratic government again, we're going to help them achieve that. We're going to support them in that effort. And then you can leverage diplomacy in many ways. Yes, it might take a while. It might take years to accomplish, but the outcome is much more sustainable than just by going against rules and against your own constitution in doing it. So the outcome, how the outcome happens really, really matters. It always matters because, again, as the sort of judicial system or the police force of the world, how we handle things sends a signal to other countries if they can get away with the same thing. So if we misbehave and we misuse our power, it sends a total green light to every other nefarious leader around the world that they can do the same thing because the United States does it. How matters.
That's a good point. The precedent. I can see how looks like we're back. I'm seeing some.
I'm back, so I don't know where I got cut off. It looks like internet connectivity issues. Where I left out.
Oh, no problem. We held it down.
All right. Well, appreciate it. Well, thanks for joining. I appreciate your perspective. And
okay, all I heard. I don't know. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did. I would like to hear the sports analogy really quick though, because I didn't hear any of it.
Yeah,
all I heard was you alluding to sports something, and then you cut out.
Okay, thanks. So, a guest mentioned it yesterday. They played basketball, and they made the connection between sports. Oh, I'm losing it again.
Yeah, I'm losing you again.
Yep.